Canada. Put on a suit, drink water, don't drink and drive. Hey, man, call your mother.
It means nothing. It means nothing.
Nah, they lying to you. It's about the money.
Now you're more fluent.
What's up, y'all? It is October 23rd, 2024. Before we get started, I want to get into this day in NBA history. This day in NBA history, October 23rd, 1962, Wilt Chamberlain scores 56 points in a 140-113 win over the Pistons when he played for the Warriors. Quick question for you, Rob. Where do you got Wilt Chamberlain all time?
I have him 11th all time.
Oh, wow. Why 11th? A lot of people, some people say he's the GOAT.
Well, I think when you look at counting stats and what he did on a personal level, I think it was amazing. Some of the most eye-popping stats, if not the most eye-popping stats in NBA history. I just think what he did to help his team win was suspect at best sometimes, and how he wanted to impact the game wasn't really necessarily what his team always needed. And he was like, hey, if I want to take every single shot this game, I'm going to. If I want to lead the league in assists because people are saying that I'm not passing enough, then I'm going to do that. And it was more so how he was viewed rather than what he was doing to make his team win, more so than anything. So I just think there's players that were making bigger contributions to winning.
Well, there you go. That was this day in NBA history.
I'm about to get mine and it's about time. Call us Grindhouse, everybody in a house grind. I'm just doing me, I ain't trying to outshine. Trying to kill my vibe is how you get outlined.
Anyway, hey, I have a question for you on that, though. There's only been, what would it be, 8 players that have been the best player on more title teams than Wilt. So, he's a top 10 level winner in that regard. And his 2 teams that he did win, the 67 76ers and the 72 Lakers, were both considered the greatest team of all time at some point. Still in that conversation, top 10 or whatever. Some people haven't moved off it. So why doesn't ever that factor into his winning contribution?
Oh, that's honestly a great question. And I think maybe Wilt is a guy that fluctuates for me a lot because I think, like I said, people get focused on the eye-popping stats a little bit too much and not necessarily like, how he was winning those games. But to be brutally honest, my 60s basketball knowledge is pretty much surface level. I can only go back and watch so many games. And,
right.
And so yeah, I wish I was exposed to more 60s basketball knowledge, to be brutally honest.
Well, you ought to get on, what's that show? What's that thing called on the subreddit? Oh, Vintage NBA. You can learn a lot there. If you ever want to check out, learn just a whole bunch about the past. They got a lot on there. But let's talk about what is your forte. Let's talk about the Spurs. So let's go first. Let's go into this season, and then we'll go into the history of the Spurs. This season, what's your prediction for the Spurs? What do you think? How many games are they going to win?
Ultimately, I think, Vegas odds are putting us about 35.5. I think we're going to surpass that. I could see us winning about 38, 39 games this season, flirting around maybe play-in status. I just think we did enough within the draft and within this offseason to merit maybe a 15-win improvement, if not more, from last season. So I think that's a pretty reasonable outcome.
Well, let me ask you this. So about 15 wins, that's almost double your production last year. You guys went 22-60, right? So where does that double in the wins production, where do you see that coming from? Because, are we talking the acquisition of Harrison Barnes? Are we talking CP3, the maturity of Wemby? Like, what, Vassell? Where are you guys seeing this coming from?
I think it's a combination of everything that you just described. It's going to be, we're going to have a true facilitator, Chris Paul. We know who's going to be passing the ball to Wemby. There's going to be no Jeremy Sohan point guard experiment. There's going to be no confusion on the facilitation end. So I think that is a huge positive. Yes, when you bring in a guy like Harrison Barnes, who is a 38% three-point shooter for his career, that does bring some stability to your shooting. And that's something we've needed a lot over the last few years. And, yes, Wemby's going to mature. He's going to be much more efficient, and he's not going to be on a minutes restriction like he was for the majority of the beginning of the season. He's going to be fully unleashed, and towards the end of the regular season, we saw what that looked like. And it was leading to success. The only thing I am kind of scratching my head about is we do not have a healthy Devin Vassell entering the regular season. So I think that could throw a rock at our window. But at the same time, I think I am happy with how many minutes Stefan Castle's going to get in his absence. So I think we're going to be able to see what he's made of sooner rather than later. And I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, but what do you see coming out of like Harrison Barnes? Because he's 32 now. Last year was 12 points on 29 minutes. Everything's going down for him, as a lot of players hit, when they get around 31, 32. Are you seeing like a resurgent coming with this? You're seeing about the same, you seeing a little less production? Or do you think, he's going to have a better season with the Spurs than he did with the Kings?
I'm thinking it's probably going to be more of the same. I'm not going to be completely unrealistic and delusional and think that he's going to have a bounce back season and, score 17, 18 points a game or anything like that. But at the end of the day, I think, he's a player that's won a championship. He's a guy that's been in the NBA for more than a decade. We don't have guys like that in the Spurs locker room. So just bringing guys like that in who can tell you what that experience is day in, day out. For a large chunk of last season, the most veteran guy on our team was Doug McDermott. And when that is your locker room presence, it's pretty tough to trust in your veterans out. Of course we have Popovich. Of course we got Gregg Pop, but you need that leadership on the court as well.
Do you see, we'll go with Vassell. We've seen improvements over the year, 5 points to 12 points to 18 points to 19 points last year. Do you see the same trajectory going up, or do you see now that the ball's going to be out of his hands a little more with Chris Paul being there? Where do you see him going in? Do you see another step up? Because to me, he's always seemed like, a fourth or fifth best player on a really good team. That would seem like his ceiling to me.
I think that's a little harsh, but at the same time, I think when I look at some of his shot selection and where he gets his offense, I do want him to improve. I think that some of what he does on offense, his efficiency, it really needs to get better if he's going to be looked at as a number 2 option to Wemby or anything close to that. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to contribute for us massively, especially now that we brought in a guy like Stefan Castle. I think he's going to put less pressure on Devin Vassell to guard the best perimeter player. I think he's going to be freed up to be able to be unleashed on offense. So I'm kind of excited to see how he embraces that new role.
What do you see? What do you see from Castle? And give it to us a numbers wise. Where do you see him being by the end of this season? And then from the eye test, what's he going to really do to help the team? Because I would think with your 4th pick in the draft, you're going to want him to contribute immediately.
Absolutely, yeah. We have really high hopes for him. I think somewhere maybe around 11, 12 points a game, 5 rebounds, at least 3 or 4 assists. I just think that he's going to have efficiency issues right out of the gate. We saw it at UConn. He was about 27% from 3. He just wasn't very effective from beyond the arc. I think we're going to still see a little bit of that from this young kid. So I'm not expecting him to just start out right out of the gate crazy, but he's going to have opportunities. He's going to have a really long leash within that offense. So he's going to be able to get some shots up. So I think he's going to get 12 points just off of his ability to slash and get to the rim.
What about Keldon Johnson? He had a down years. He was 22 a game 2 years ago. Wemby gets there. He goes down to about 15, 16 a game. Where do you see him now with this whole new thing? About 15 and 16, is that going to be his role with Wemby? Was that just a blip? Do you see him bouncing back to a 20-point score? Where do you see that?
I definitely don't see him bouncing back to being a 20-point scorer because we relegated him to a bench role. And I think that we're kind of telling him hey, if you want to be a part of this new wave of Spurs and this new era of what we're building around Wemby, you may have to fit in and be the Manu Ginobili here. If you're gonna fit in, you may have to come in and be that spark off the bench. So if he's willing to buy into that role for the betterment of the team, then I'm all for it, because it seems like he could be a good fit for that. He's really good, high energy guy, and he lost a lot of weight over the off season. I think he cut about 15, 20 pounds. He's looking really lean. I think it's going to help him on defense as well. So I think I'm pretty excited about what we're going to get from Keldon.
Well, I like Trey Jones. You know, if he could just learn to hit threes, you know, then I'd really like Trey Jones. I'd say he'd probably be the best backup in the league. But where do you see Trey Jones fitting in all this? Because he started most games last year, but now that they got Paul there, do you think this is going to help him? Do you think it's going to help him in the threes? Did you hear any stories of him working on the threes?
I haven't seen too much stories, or haven't heard too many stories about his 3-point progression or anything like that. Honestly, if anything, I think this may be kind of stifling for his development. I think he was on a trajectory to kind of, you know, take the reins of the offense. Last year, it was clear the offense ran better when he was out there facilitating. You know, everyone knew it. It was night and day. So it kind of felt like he was the next one up. Obviously, Chris Paul comes in, and you're going to take the backup role to the point guard more likely than not. But at the end of the day, I don't see how this doesn't, you know, throw a little hitch in his player development as well, because I feel like he was poised to be a starter.
Well, let's ask about the big one. So let's go into Wemby, okay? Wemby, obviously, he only played, like 29 minutes last year. I don't know what they're going to project him for. Normally, when we see people about his height, you know, the Mark Eatons, the Murasans, the Bradleys, they don't really rebound that well. You know, the only really good rebounder around his height was a Sampson, and he came in and he rebounded really well. But I don't think some of the things we focus on is he only shot 32% from three. He only shot 46% from the field. And the guy with his body, his height, his skill set, you know, those numbers are just really unacceptable. What do you think the factors were? And do you think this year he's going to hit above those, like 50%, going to be more efficient, you know, and the more efficient he is, the more games they're going to win?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just highlighted the key area where he needs to improve is just his overall efficiency. And I think a lot of that, especially what we saw later on in the season, was shot selection. It was his shot selection was much better, and that led to a much higher efficiency. And I'm somebody that really isn't too tough on rookies, especially 19 and 20-year-old guys, when the only key thing that they're missing from their game is efficiency, because I know that that's something that can be worked on pretty easily. But if they're not working hard, or they don't have the intangibles or anything like that, I'm usually a lot tougher. And the only thing that we really saw that Victor was missing was just some of that shot selection, just some of that kind of 19, 20-year-oldness where, you know, you took a fadeaway when you could have just taken your defender and just finished on him with the layup. And right. So I think that we're going to see him make better decisions in year 2, year 3, year 4, and you know, he's going to turn into an absolute monster.
Well, I was looking at the box score, because I'm not going to lie, by the end of the year and say I wasn't watching a lot of San Antonio games at the end of the year. You know, I was more so trying to gear up for the playoff teams and all that. But I was doing a lot of box score watching, and then maybe you could tell me what it was. His field goal percentage was, I want to say the month of April was the worst he had all year if you broke it down by month. And so what made him revert to at the very last of the season, when you should be getting better, you've learned how to play all year. Instead, now you're having your worst month in inefficiency.
I'm not 100% sure about that, to be brutally honest. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that towards the end of the season, I don't even think we were playing Wemby consistently. I think that he was out for several games, but there was a lot more sort of freedom to his game that we were allowing him, which I don't necessarily fully agree with, because, you know, him taking step back threes isn't ideal for our offense. I think.
Yeah. Why does he need to step back?
He doesn't. He just he literally just needs full extension.
Go up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unless Rudy Gobert's hand is right up in your face, you really don't need to alter your shot. I mean, and even then, you just shoot right over him.
Yeah, because his raw numbers were great. They posted it. He was playing like 36 minutes a game, and I don't know whatever it was. He played 5-6 games or whatever, so he's like 26, 13, and 7. But his efficiency, his raw numbers are going up, obviously, but his efficiency was going down. So I was wondering maybe he was getting tired. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't watch the games at the end of the year, so I can't speak on it. I was just wondering, since if you did, because I'm going to be honest, I don't catch San Antonio Spurs games like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's tough to get excited about teams that are, winning 20, 22.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to get excited about those teams, but yeah, I also think that he was having to exert himself on defense quite a bit more. So I don't know if that somehow played into his efficiency issues as well, but I mean, I think ultimately what's going to save that is shot selection. And as he gets older, as he gets more mature, that's going to improve vastly.
So what do you think you guys are looking at him for this year? Like, averages wise, minutes wise, where are you predicting him to be at?
I mean, I'm thinking he's going to probably be in the 33, 34 minutes per game range. I couldn't see him really breaking over 35. It just seems like we're still trying to, not necessarily baby him, but just make sure that we maximize his games. We don't want to necessarily, wear him into the ground. But I see him averaging, 25, maybe 26 points a game. I see him, over 12 boards a game. Efficiency slightly better. He's still going to have his shot selection issues. He's still going to take some ill-advised step backs from time to time. So I'm not going to say he's going to be one of the most efficient bigs in the league, but I think we're going to see improvement, and he's going to lead the league in blocks per game again next year. No doubt about that.
Well, he was at 3.6 last year in 29 minutes. So with the extra 4 or 5 minutes, what is he breaking 4 a game?
I think some teams have wised up a little bit to Wemby, and they're a little bit hesitant to take the ball up to the rim, and it's almost like he's deterring them. So I think maybe his blocks won't fluctuate too much, but if he does have 4 blocks a game, wouldn't surprise me one bit.
So let me ask you something. Do you think he's on trajectory to be the greatest Spur of all time?
I think that's such a difficult thing to be, because Tim Duncan set the bar so high, and how he conducted himself, the level of winning, the longevity with the winning. Wembanyama would have to do something so spectacular for such a long time to surpass that. I'm going to say he's on a trajectory where he could, but will he? I mean, the likelihood of that is slim to none.
Where do you have Duncan all time?
I have Duncan 5 all time.
Who are the 4 ahead of him?
MJ, LeBron, Kareem, Bill Russell.
That's it. Yeah. And then we have pretty much the same list, except I have Duncan 6th, and I'd have Wilt 5th. Okay. Or I have Wilt 4th, and I have Kareem 5th, and all that. But I want to talk about this because I see this on TikTok a lot. How do you define greatness and all that? Like, what made you get Tim Duncan at your 5th? And then when you see things like where people are like Kobe's over Duncan, like that just blows my mind. I think you're in the same camp. Well, tell me what you think greatness is. What is greatness? And then where Duncan wins in those areas over Kobe.
Well, I think what we mentioned earlier, and what I look at usually the most, is your contribution to winning. And were you a winning conductor, and were you facilitating that winning? And to me, when I look at guys like Tim Duncan and Kobe, was Kobe a magnificent player and an amazing athlete? Of course, but there was things that Kobe did within the first several years of his career that really, was detrimental to his ability to win. He was literally fighting with the best player on his team when he could have mended that relationship sooner than later, and it led to more victories. I think that's why you see a guy like Kobe change from number 8 to number 24. And I feel like that's when you saw the Mamba mentality, that maturity. You never had to see that with Duncan. He came into the league already 4 years out of Wake Forest, ready to go, ready to lead the team, ready to be rookie of the year, first team All-NBA, just an absolute polished leader right out of the gate. And I don't think that he gets enough credit for that. So when I look at guys in greatness, it's not only your contributions to winning, but what were you like to the guys around you? Were you able to just create that winning environment? And what did that look like for a long period of time? And damn, Tim Duncan did it just about better than anyone. And it led to 5 rings.
Right. Well, so I would say, I'm going to piggyback on that. So I would like to say, this is the way I look at it. First off, the first level of greatness, before we even get into greatness, to me would be being the best player on a title team, because that's the goal of the game. You take the court to win the fucking game. And then after you get done, the role you want to play in winning the game is being the number one reason why, the main contributor and the reason why. So that's how I always start up. How many times were you the best player on a title team? That's really where greatness starts to me. And there can be blips and movements and all that. There's exceptions to the rules, but generally my greatness level falls that. By the very definition of the word great, it's above and beyond normal or average, or normal what's perspective. So with people doing that, so the way I look at it, to me, there's 3 legs to be great, because everything else is speculative. Okay? Everything else is a what if, this, that, and the other. Like when people talk about, like I was on a live earlier, I think yesterday, and they were talking about floor raising. Like, well, Curry raises the floor higher than Magic. And I go, well, how do you prove that to me? You know what I mean? Like, I get that you're saying, well, because, and then they're like, well, I know. Well, how do you know? Show me Magic with that Warriors team, and then show me Curry, and then show me who raises the level higher. You can't. You know what I mean? That's speculative. Yeah. All this other shit. So there's 3 ways that's not argumentative. Okay? These are facts. To me, it's stats. Okay? And it's not in this order. Stats, accolades, and titles. If I say Duncan's got 5 championships, there's no argument he's got 5 championships. Now, we can argue when he's the best player. I personally think he was the best player on all 5. I don't know if you disagree with that or not, but I think he's definitely the best player on all 5. I think there's an argument. There's no argument for 4. You know what I mean? And there's undeniable evidence for 3. As far as the 5th one goes, maybe Kawhi outplayed him in the finals, maybe, but Duncan outplayed him in the regular season and the playoffs overall. So Duncan just was the best player. You know what I mean? You don't have to get the finals MVP to be the best player. Somebody can outplay you for 5 games and you be the best player for the first 100. It's just the way it goes. So with that being said, that's how I look at it. So when we go Kobe, this is the way I tell it to people, and then nobody really has an answer on this, because they'll be like, yeah, but Kobe had more skill. And Kobe, I said, that's great, but if it results in less winning, I don't give a shit. He can have more skill, but if it results in less winning, like I think Elijah one is clearly more skilled than Shaq. Shaq had one dominant thing over Elijah one, and that resulted in more winning. So I got to give it to Shaq. I got to give the greatness nod to Shaq. You know what I mean? Even though Hakeem is the best player I've ever seen. Huh?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's so many people are thinking it's skill over production when it's ass backwards. It's the other way around. I would rather have a guy that can use 3 tools masterfully than a guy who can use 6 tools very, very well. Give me the guy that can use the 3 tools masterfully.
Well, so it goes like this. So back to my point though. So on the Kobe Duncan thing, right? So championship. Duncan has him in championship. Duncan was the best player on more title teams, you know what I mean, than Kobe. The championships go to him. Just the reason why we would never argue Robert Horry's championships are worth more than Kobe's, because 7 is worth more than 5, but it's the role they played. Kobe's 5 is worth more than Horry's 7. So he's got the championship argument. Now we go to the accolades argument. Well, he's got more MVPs, more finals MVPs, rookie of the year, more individual trophies, all that. He's got the accolades. Okay, now we go to the stats. Well, you could argue you want somebody's stat. I personally would rather have Duncan's stat line than Kobe's stat line. That's me, though. Okay, but other people might want to have that. Okay, so there's a 50-50 argument in stats. I'll even give you the argument. Let's say it's 70-30 Kobe. So I have 100% argument in championships, 100% argument in accolades, and I'll give you 70% to our 30% in stats. So I have a 230 to 70 advantage. I don't understand the argument. Where's the argument?
The argument to me doesn't exist, because Kobe is clearly the 3rd best player of the 2000s whenever you break it down, and it's not even close. And to me, even ranking him above Shaq doesn't fully make sense. whenever you see how their careers ended up shaking out. And it's not a slight to Kobe. It's just there was a lot of greatness at the time he played. And to say that he's behind Duncan and Shaq, it's not a slight to him. It's just facts. And I like how you broke that down.
Well, I got Kobe at 11th all time. That's where I have it. And there's nothing wrong with being the 11th greatest player of all time. It's it's a great place to be. I'd love to be in that position. It's just that simple. And like I said, I don't understand like what people say. And then they start saying like, oh, well, you care about accolades. I just care about what is. Those are facts. There's no room for interpretation. They're the facts. Everything else is what if, speculative. And I tell people this all the time. You're right. If a bunch of shit that didn't happen did happen, that player would be greater. Like I was on here talking to this one guy about Jerry West. I think Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, and Dr. J are overhyped because they were never the best player on a title team. I think as opposed to guys like Isaiah Thomas, Rick Barry, John Havlicek, Bob Pettit. I think those guys should be higher. I think those guys should be in the West, Dr. J spots, things like that, over the guys that didn't get it done. So I had a guy tell me, he's like, well, what about when Frank Sylvie missed that shot? Jerry West would have. I go, yeah, but he would have, but he didn't. And he goes, but I mean, we're talking inches. I go, hey, if my aunt had a dick, she'd be my uncle. And that's how much difference a few inches can make.
You hit the nail on the head. And it's you know what? It doesn't even matter what era we're talking about, because I still hear the same people that are like, oh, if Kevin Durant's foot was just a little bit further back, they would have won and the Bucks wouldn't. It's like, dude, it's the same what if hypothetical. And if you're basing any argument on that, I'm not trying to hear that.
Like, yeah, I'll put it this way. I'm in Phoenix. You're in San Antonio. I'm a Suns fan. You know what I mean? I'll put it this way. 07, no bullshit. If the bloody nose didn't happen, if the ref wasn't betting against us, if we didn't get those bullshit suspensions, but they happened. So at the end of the day, we didn't win. That's the end of the story.
Absolutely. That's the way history shakes out. It's written by the winners.
So that's what I'm saying. So I don't get it. I don't get the argument. So to me, that's just the most simple way to do it. You break it down to 3 areas. You go stats, you go accolades, you go titles, you know what I mean? And then you just see who's got better ones. We have to speculate shit. Now, if we want to start doing what ifs and all, then that goes into the argument better, not greater. But yeah, I'm just baffled at what you come across in your titles.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And yeah, better is certainly different than greater. Because if we're talking better, like, I mean, there's a lot of people that would say Kyrie Irving is the most skilled player in NBA history. And I think that is certainly a valid take. But at the end of the day,
depends what kind of skill, but it depends what skill we're talking about.
Right. Well, see, but I could hear a case for it. I could understand it and see how you got there logically. So if you're talking about dribbling, you're talking about straight up ball handling and making the ball appear like it's on a string. Absolutely. One of the most skilled, if not the most skilled player in NBA history in that regard.
Yeah, but that's not all the skills, though. You know what I mean? Like his screening's not very good. He's not very skilled. So that's what I'm saying. Like, for example, I would argue, like, if we went skill by skill, I would say Elijah Wood's one of the most skilled players in NBA history. It's just not the same skill that they value. You know what I mean? Because he's not going to be crossing people over and now that, but his screening's going to be better. His post work's going to be better. His post defense is going to be better. His pick and roll defense is going to be better. You know what I mean? Those are different skills. It's just what skills do we value? Because when people say skills, they really only talk about dribbling and shooting for the most part.
Absolutely. I think most people, when you're talking about skills, it's referring to offensive skills, because I think that when you're talking to your average person that's enjoying a basketball game, they're really not going to be able to decipher the difference between good footwork in the post and kind of slow footwork in the post. They're just going to be able to pay attention to when the ball goes in the hoop. So I think that whenever we're breaking it down, yeah, sure, we can understand why Hakeem is up there, but I'm saying I can understand an argument for a guy like Kyrie, but obviously when I'm thinking Hakeem, I and you're looking at both sides of the ball, yeah, he's without a doubt one of the most skilled guys in the NBA.
So, 2 questions, because we said greatest is different best. So we'll go Spurs. Which one's the greatest team and which one's the best team that you guys ever had?
That's a great question.
Or they might be the same. I don't know.
I mean, I think both I mean, 2014 is going to have to be up there with either of those, best or greatest. That's some of the best team basketball I've ever got to see. The way that we moved the ball was fantastic. That was when the most beautiful game video came out, and everyone was just marveling at the passing of the Spurs and how we represented true team basketball. And that was the team I was most proud of, especially after how we came back, after how we lost in 2013, got our ass kicked after that goddamn Ray Allen shot. So I think that it was a situation where the revenge was sweet, but we also did it the right way. And so it was a great team victory, and the only team in NBA history where no one averaged over 30 minutes a game. It was truly whoever is in that lineup, they are there to fill that role. And sometimes it meant that Thiago Splitter was going to play more minutes. Boris Diaw was going to end up playing some more minutes than usual. It meant that, maybe Danny Green was going to have to step up big and play some huge minutes one night, but it didn't really matter. It was just such an amazing team effort. So I think that's probably my greatest Spurs of all time. But I think I think maybe the best, or maybe my favorite, is it's got to be the 99 squad. It's got to be the 99 squad, just because I think it's just childhood nostalgia. But that's definitely my favorite team. Just the first championship, also the Memorial Day miracle on the way to that playoff run was just spectacular. So both of those teams come to mind.
See, I was going to say, I think your best team ever is the 2014, but I think the greatest team would have been the 99 Spurs. I think that start 6-8, and then go 31-5, and then go 15-2. So that's 46-7 down the stretch. You guys sweep Kobe and Shaq. You know what I mean? It's the first title, but it's one of the most dominating playoff runs ever. And it was dominated through defense, regular games, 83-65 and, things like that. I remember nobody could score. And that was like the last decent year of David Robinson's athleticism. Maybe you could say the next year, but it's one of those 2 years. So, yeah. And then I was, Larry Johnson was my favorite player. So I was going for the Knicks, and, the Knicks just couldn't do nothing for him. The Suns were out in the first round. So, I was rooting for my player then instead of my team, but yeah, they just couldn't do nothing. So if I would say, I'd say that's your greatest team because of that postseason run. It was a very dominating postseason run, 15-2. For reference, for context, the 96 Bulls went 15-3. So, and the 99 Spurs went 15-2. So I don't know. I think that's the greatest team. And then I think that's the, I personally think, I know a lot of people are on Duncan's individual performance in 03, that 24-17, 5-5, but I really liked him at 27-14 in that first run. I think that was his best. I think that was his best individual finals performance. I don't know where you rank him. You think that one is, or 03?
I mean, I think just when you look at the eye-popping stats, I think it's probably 03. Just when you look at the fact that it was, David Robinson on his last leg. It was, Manu and Tony hadn't really established themselves yet. So they're like, the foundation was really just kind of up in the air. And that was before we really had solidified ourselves as even a dynasty yet. We just had one championship at that time. People were still like, hey, is this team even going to be able to get it done? And so we came out and, en route to that championship, we ended up closing the door on the Lakers three-peat. And so that to me was one of the sweetest things. So I think that playoff run for 03, yeah, that may have been the best we saw of Duncan.
Well, here's the thing about the 03 one, though, too, is because, like you said, we'd only won one championship. Well, in 99, they won 0. Then you're like, before Ginobili and Parker had solidified themselves, Jaren Jackson never solidified himself. And he won with that. And like I said, it's just that dominator, because I'll tell you what, the 03 was the weirdest run I ever seen, because it was 4-2, 4-2, 4-2, 4-2. They love to finish off teams in 6, no matter who they played or whatever. Like, I remember the Suns played them really well that year, won 3 out of 4 in the 03 season. Took game 1 off those 2 bullshit-ass bank shot threes from Stoudemire and the Marbury. And then the Spurs won that one, and then Dirk got hurt in the conference finals. or he forgot how to shoot in the second round. And then, yeah, it was just a knockdown. Like, it was hard to score in the 03 finals, on both sides. They even had Mutombo on the other side too, so it's not like the Spurs were lighting it up. But yeah, so I don't know. My favorite Duncan was 09. I think he was a little more athletic. I talked to Rudy Tomjanovich about this, and he said after the first game they played him, when he was coaching the Rockets, first game played the Spurs, like, we're in trouble. This dude knows how to play.
That's a great quote. But yeah, I think that's a great version of Tim Duncan, because that's also Tim Duncan that was a little bit more sure of himself as a rim protector. I think his scoring was a little bit better earlier on in his career, just because of his speed and his versatility whenever he first got into the league. But
he had both knees.
Yes. He had that burst. He wasn't the bank shot wasn't perfected yet, but he had that burst.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. So who do you think Duncan was the best player on all 5 Spurs teams?
I think he was the most important player for sure, without a doubt. Like, you take Tim Duncan off of any of those teams, we don't win. So yeah.
So best player?
Yeah, I would say, well, yeah, best player. But just because, like earlier, we talked about most important or greatest and best, because I think Kawhi maybe he was our best player in 2014. I'm not sure, but at the same time, Tim Duncan was our most important player inside the locker room.
Like in the playoffs, and I forget what the exact numbers are, but like Duncan gets more points, more rebounds, more blocks, more assists, and maybe Kawhi gets more steals. So Duncan's just out for producing him at every turn.
I think it was more so of what Kawhi was asked to do defensively, and who his assignment was, and the fact that he was guarding LeBron, and the fact that we knew how much of an impossible task that was, especially for Kawhi. I think he was 22 or 23 at the time. So that's just such a big ask for somebody so young. So I think when I look back on their level of responsibility on defense, Kawhi was up against it. So what
do you say? But what do you say to people that say, rim protection is by far the more valuable defensive thing, and that's what Duncan was asked to do?
I firmly believe that rim protection is more important, but whoever's guarding LeBron James has the tougher assignment, period.
No, I agree with that, but that's 5 games out of 100 and something, right? So wouldn't it be Duncan for the most part? Like I said, I'll agree with you if you want to say Kawhi was more important in the finals. I'm cool with that. Just overall, I just think Duncan is the best player, because people don't understand that. And I'm like, dude, I think he's the best player on 5 title teams, and that's very rare. Only Jordan and Bill Russell can say more.
Absolutely. Throughout the course of that entire regular season and the majority of the playoffs, absolutely, by far more important. And even in the finals, honestly, like, still, I'll go back to my statement. If you take Tim Duncan off that floor, we don't win.
What about if you guys were doing an all-time starting Spurs team? Who would it be?
I would have obviously David at center. I would have Tim at power forward. I would have George Gervin at small forward. I'd probably slightly alter position, push him over to small forward, even though he did play some small forward, but mostly shooting guard. And even though it's kind of against his position to start, I would start Manu and Tony, even though Manu's better off the bench.
Why wouldn't you have Kawhi in that starting 5? Put George at the 2 and Kawhi at 3.
I could, but if is this an all-time starting 5 just based on like how I would want them to operate together, or based on
I guess.
Okay.
But I'll put it this way. Let's say we're taking all-time starting 5s for each franchise, and we're putting them all against each other. So that's how we're doing it.
Okay. So if I'm assigned to be Coach Popovich in this situation, then yeah, I would start Kawhi. I would have George Gervin at 2, Tony at the 1, and then Manu playing his most comfortable position, coming in that 6 man for sure.
Do you think Victor Wembanyama has a better or worse chance of supplanting David Robinson in that all-time starting 5?
I think eventually he will surpass David Robinson in that starting 5. I think that, what we were talking about earlier, makes a lot of sense. And, I feel very similarly to, were you the best player on a championship team? And David Robinson never was the best player on a championship team. And I think that eventually, whenever I look at Wembanyama's career, we're going to be seeing him with a Finals MVP. We're going to see him with multiple championships, hoisting the Larry O'Brien multiple times. And if he's the best player on a championship team, then that's more than what David was doing. So I think that he's going to be doing that. It's not going to be soon, but I think that we could be looking at a guy that's, going to be a top 20 guy all time potentially.
Let's do some what ifs. We were talking about what ifs, but let's talk about some close what ifs and all that. In your opinion, what happens if Ray Allen doesn't make that shot? What is the Spurs legacy now being 6-0, especially Duncan being 6-0 in the finals?
Well, I mean, I think if he doesn't hit that shot, I mean, I don't necessarily know if we win back-to-back years. I think we needed to lose in 13 to have the fuel to win in 14. So I think if we win in 13, maybe we don't win in 14. So I think that it's kind of a, it's an interesting what if, but I still think that, maybe Duncan is 5-0 and that conversation is a little bit more interesting. But yeah, I don't know if we would win 6 rings, to be brutally honest.
If you guys did win back-to-back, where do you think that conversation changed? Do you think there's still an argument, Kobe over Duncan, or do you think any of that changes? Or do you think Duncan's, universally top 3, or like, where do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, it would be tough for me to not rank him above Kareem. Like I would potentially have him in those Kareem conversations, MJ, LeBron, and then, there would be another tier of guys where it's like, hey, why not Duncan? He would be in that conversation.
Yeah, there's a couple. See, that's how much difference a few inches can make. I want to talk about this too. People don't really realize this, but let's use 2004 and 2006. So 2004 is the Derek Fisher .4 shot after Duncan made like an incredible shot to put him up, right? And then in 06, there's the Ginobili and 1 foul on Dirk that sends the game to overtime and loses it from the Spurs. Now, it's realistically, if everything still plays out the same, and obviously we don't know, but just off of what did play out, the Spurs are roughly 2 shots away from winning 5 straight titles. If those 2 plays don't happen. There's an argument for them, 5 straight titles. Where does the Spurs dynasty rank then if they somehow managed to win 5 straight? That means they would have won in 03, 04, 05, 06, and 07. Where do they rank then? Where does Duncan rank then? Where does Popovich rank then?
I mean, I already view Popovich as the greatest coach of all time. So that to me is a fact. But at the same time, I understand that there's other people that have different opinions. But I'm of the thinking if that were to happen, that would be probably the second. That would be the best dynasty of all time. That would be the best dynasty of all time in recent basketball. If we're going back and we're looking at 60s and we're looking at what Bill Russell was doing, obviously no one's touching that. No one in the modern NBA with this amount of teams can win with that kind of consistency. I don't really think so. But whenever I'm looking at, you win 5 straight, dude, that's more than what the Bulls were doing. That's, he would be in conversations above LeBron, and, it would be more like, who's the GOAT, MJ or Duncan?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but that's what I'm saying. We see how much like just a few shots can be, because a lot of people don't even really realize that. You know what I mean? They win a title, they lose on a bullshit shot. They win a title, lose on a bullshit shot, win another title. And just a lot of people just don't realize how close that really was. Because I'm a big proponent of Duncan, and all that. And that's actually what I want to talk about, the Popovich thing. How good a coach is Pop really? Because, he was 17-47 before Duncan got there. And he really ain't been making the playoffs since Duncan left. So how good a coach is Popovich really? To me, that really just shows what a testament Duncan is.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think he'll be the first one to tell you that you need talent to win games. And we've had a lot of young talent, sure, but it hasn't been ready to go, playoff level talent. So I think when I'm looking at his coaching ability, it existed for that 2+ decades where he was able to get a team that had a lot of different motivations, a lot of different backgrounds, guys coming from different parts of the world entirely with different life experiences, and getting them to come together and buy into the system and get that system to win in multiple decades. So I think that it's the longevity of that, and the fact that he won championships in the late 90s, early 2000s, when it was a very, hey, we're going to slow the game down, get the ball to the basket. And then also a title in 2014 where it was a little bit different. The spacing was starting to push out beyond the 3-point line more and more. So I think it's a testament to him and how he can adapt into whichever NBA environment he's able to coach. And, if we're looking at the last few years, sure, it has been really, really rough. I think that, the rug was swept out from under us. We thought we were building the franchise around Kawhi. And then obviously several years ago, we know what happened, and that kind of sent us into a different style of rebuild. And, I don't necessarily think that's entirely on him.
Who's the Mount Rushmore of coaches?
I gotta say, Popovich, Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach, Pat Riley.
That's where I think that's mine. I don't see any way you could have anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, that makes the most sense to me. I mean, there's so many coaches that are won so many games and did so many amazing things, but you got to hang banners. You got to win championships, and those guys led teams to the finals so many times.
Yeah, I guess the next argument, maybe like Kerr is up in the mix next, if we're doing, hanging banners and all that. Let's talk about you. So you make, so you do like film editing and stuff like that as well?
Absolutely. I'm a full-time cinematographer, editor. I live in Austin, Texas. I've been in the film community here for about a decade, shooting short films, feature films, commercials, ads, whatever I get paid to shoot. But I also, make basketball edits and comments on basketball because I played college basketball. I it's a big part of my life and a large part of who I am and the person I am. So where'd
you play college ball at?
I played my freshman year at Texas Tech, and then I played my next year and a half at Mary Hardin Baylor.
Gotcha. What position were you?
I was kind of all over the place depending on where I was. I'm about 6'6", 225. So there was lineups where if it was more of a small ball lineup, I could get plugged in at like a 3, maybe even a 4 at times. And then there was times where if we had a pretty good size lineup, they were trying to push me out on the wing more, which was not my strong suit. I couldn't guard shooting guards at all. So that was ultimately my downfall.
Well, I'm 5'9", 205. You wouldn't be able to score on me in the post. You'd be able to shoot over me. You wouldn't be able to move me. Let me put it that way. My postie is nasty. And if you don't believe me, ask Isaiah Ryder. Okay, it took all he had to score on me.
There you go, dude.
He had me bouncing on him. Huh?
Absolute legend. I loved watching Isaiah Ryder back in the day.
Yeah, man, when I ran into him at the gym one time, I was like, oh, shit. Then I said, bro, you got to post me up. I got to see what this NBA post game is like. I was like, don't come at me half-ass. Came at me half-ass, and then he missed. And then when he started posting me up, I looked like, I don't know, Dale Davis in a Blazers uniform just bouncing off Shaq.
Oh, my goodness.
So he put it on me after that and all that. So what's like some of your more popular videos that we might have seen?
I mean, I like storytelling stuff. So there's definitely some videos where, like I break down like some of the more rare jerseys in NBA history. And I'm talking about like the Chris Paul Valentine Day jersey. One of my favorite historical videos I did a video on Elmore Smith, I know you know the name Elmore Smith because you know NBA history.
I have him in my phone. We've been talking recently. He's supposed to do the show when he's got an autobiography coming out. Whenever that gets done, he's supposed to do the show. But yeah, I've been talking to Elmore Smith.
Hell yeah. I absolutely love to hear that. I did a video on him where in a 9-day stretch, he had 45 blocks in 3 games. And I made a huge video breaking it down and said like, oh, this is the most like, the best like week and a half anyone has ever defended the rim. And so it was, it's a lot of it's just like that. It's like, how can I tell something interesting basketball related within like a story? Because, like I said, I'm a cinematographer, love to tell stories.
Well, you know what you ought to do, and your Spurs played a major role in it. You ought to do a cinematography one of the 95 Rockets run. Because I think the 95 Rockets are the greatest team of all time by what the word great means. And the reason why is this. Okay, did you know that the Rockets, I've said this before, but did you know the Rockets, they're the only team ever to win 4 rounds on the road?
Mm.
Did you know that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
They had to go through a 3 seed, a 2 seed, and a 1 seed.
Right. Well, let's keep it going. Did you know they're the only team ever to beat 4 teams with at least 55 wins in the same run?
That's wild.
And then every team had won at least 57. Then did you know they're also the only team ever to beat the teams with the top 4 records in the league at that year? Then did you know they're the only team ever to run through an MVP in every round that was still playing at an all NBA level?
God damn.
So wait a minute. Do you know? So if you put those all together, do you know what the odds of that happening is? Since it's never happened before, since even one of those things, for all 4 of those things to happen all in the same run?
I don't even know.
1 in 645,000.
Jeez.
So I think you need to make a cinematography about that, because that is by far the most impressive thing that's ever happened. And I don't think people talk about it enough.
It really doesn't. And that's one of the things that bothers me when people, start to talk about hypotheticals. And one of the hypotheticals is like, oh, if MJ didn't go play baseball, I'm like, well, I don't know about even if he didn't go play baseball, I still think that 95 Rockets team, they were kind of just destined to win that year. It kind of just seemed like whoever was in their path, they were just going to mow right over. And to me, I agree with you wholeheartedly. When you look at some of the most impressive playoff runs in NBA history, it's hard to not put that at number 1.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And the only way that you don't have them as the greater team is if you value, regular season over postseason, and I don't. And I just think that's the greatest accomplishment of all time. Then what pisses me off when people go, well, yeah, only because MJ wasn't playing. Well, he was playing, and he played in the playoffs, and he knocked out a team in the playoffs, and he was averaging 32 a game in the playoffs.
Right.
So it'd be one thing like MJ never beat Hakeem in the playoffs, so MJ wasn't stopping Hakeem from winning. So you can't act like MJ was Hakeem's kryptonite when they never met. Yeah. That's what drives me nuts. Where do you got Hakeem all time?
I have Hakeem at number 10.
I have him at 10 too.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you just look at the fact that NBA players today are still trying to get some of that Hakeem Olajuwon in their game. They're still going to him to, practice the dream shake, to check out his footwork. You saw it through the mid 2000s. Everyone was going to him. You still see it nowadays. And that just because his skill set and what he does and what made him effective translates so well. Doesn't matter the era.
That dude was awesome. All right, man. I'm gonna ask you one more thing, and then we're gonna go. Question: what do the Spurs? Just one thing. What do the Spurs need to get into the playoffs this year? What were they missing last year that they need this year to get into the playoffs? One thing. Biggest thing they need.
Just keep feeding Wemby. There was too many times last year where we were taking ill-advised threes, step back threes that made no sense within the flow of our offense. We just need to feed the monster. We have a guy that has an 8-foot wingspan, and we were not effectively throwing him lob passes. That is absolutely bonkers to me. I don't think that we're going to have those same problems this season. As long as that young man is healthy, I think we'll be all good. So let's just feed the French beast.
I got you. All right, Rob, tell everybody where they can find you.
You can find me at B-Ball Archives. You can find me also at RLM Productions, doing some cinematography work in Austin, making videos on TikTok. Like I said, at B-Ball Archives. Also have the Baseline Bums podcast. Go check us out on YouTube and also on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And appreciate you for having me.
Yeah. Hey, also too, if you really want to find him, if you can get his last name, you can always search him on the internet, get his home address, just show up. He likes cookies, bring some stuff. Anyways, we out. We'll check y'all later. Thanks for watching.
Oh, Canada.